The European airliner Concorde was one of only 2 commercial supersonic jets and in operation until 2003. Now, startup Boom Supersonic is working to pick up where Concorde left off. The company has released a demonstrator aircraft called the XB-1. It's a model for their future commercial airliner. With its fast speed, Boom says a flight from London to New York would take just 3 hours and 15 minutes. The company is hoping to eventually charge around just £70 for one trip. Boom is planning to start building the first plane in 2023 and start flying it in 2026. US President Joe Biden is making his case for a $170 billion or a £120 billion electric vehicle plan. He says the investment is needed for the US to lead the industry. NTD's Christina Kim brings us more.
President Biden pitched his $174 billion electric vehicle plan in Michigan Tuesday.
The future of the auto industry is electric. There's no turning back.
At the Ford electric vehicle plant in Dearborn, Michigan, Biden called for the United States to lead the world in electric vehicle manufacturing, infrastructure, deployment, and innovation.
How the future is going to be made, but it's going to be made here in America. Made in America.
Biden made the case for government grants, tax credits, and consumer incentives to lower electric vehicle manufacturing costs and support market demand. He proposed point-of-sale incentives to encourage Americans to buy electric cars, although the incentives will not apply to expensive luxury models. Biden is also seeking to put more charging stations around the country. The goal is to build a national network of 500,000 of them by 2030. There are now around 100,000 in the United States. His plan also calls for low-cost loans to companies that produce clean energy vehicles in the United States. Biden faces resistance from many congressional Republicans on his electric vehicle focus. Christina Kim, NTD News.
It's rare to find Republicans and Democrats in Washington agreeing on anything. But there is one thing bringing both parties together: condemning the CCP for its ongoing human rights abuses. NTD Steve Lance has more.
Republicans and Democrats are in lockstep calling out human rights abuses and genocide in China. They held a bipartisan hearing to examine the implication of holding the Winter Olympics in the communist country. They called on the International Olympic Committee to reassess its relationship with Beijing.
Xi Jinping and the CCP are persecuting believers and all manifestations of faith and spirituality, including Christians, Tibetan Buddhists, and Falun Gong practitioners, in ways not seen since the Cultural Revolution.
Democrats and Republicans alike said we can no longer turn a blind eye to Beijing's disgraceful human rights record in the face of profits.
I've said if we don't speak out against human rights violations in China for commercial reasons, we lose all moral authority to speak out for human rights anywhere.
The International Olympic Committee is no stranger when it comes to dealing with Beijing. In 2008, in spite of widespread calls to boycott the Beijing Olympic Games, they carried on business as usual.
The International Olympic Committee's shameful choice to hold the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing and other cities in China sadly makes the Olympics an immediate focal point for our consideration. How did it come to this moment where an event designed to uplift the human spirit is being held in a nation that is crushing the human spirit?
Human rights activist Young Jin Lee says the international community is at risk of becoming a tool in the CCP's soft power strategy.
I'm calling on the U.S. and its allies to do the following: initiate a joint political boycott of the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics, urging businesses and athletes not to participate in the Games.
Democrat Congressman from Massachusetts, James McGovern, thinks this is a necessary approach.
An announcement to postpone the 2020 Tokyo Games was made only 4 months before it was scheduled to start. If we can postpone an Olympics by a year for a pandemic, we can surely postpone an Olympics for a year for a genocide.
Voices around the world are calling to boycott the 2022 Beijing Winter Games. But is the International Olympic Committee listening? In the wake of the CCP virus pandemic, many eyes are certainly watching how they respond. Steve Lance, NTD News, Washington, D.C.
Amazon is reportedly in talks to buy Hollywood's MGM studio. That's according to a report by The Information. MGM is one of the world's oldest film studios and behind the James Bond movies. It also owns the Epix cable channel and makes TV shows, including The Handmaid's Tale and Fargo. Amazon declined to comment on the report. The latest news comes after AT&T said it would combine its Warner Media business with Discovery. That would create a big new player in streaming and puts rivals under pressure to level up. And in other news, working long hours is killing hundreds of thousands of people a year. That's according to the World Health Organization. And it says the trend is worsening during the pandemic.
Tapping away at the computer keyboard and sitting for hours in the office chair. It's an image familiar to many, but the norm of working long hours is killing hundreds of thousands of people every year. That's according to the World Health Organization, which warned Monday that longer working hours is a worsening trend that may have intensified during the pandemic. In the first global study of deaths associated with longer working hours, around 745,000 people died from stroke and heart disease associated with longer working hours. WHO Technical Officer Frank Pegger explains.
We have some evidence that shows that when countries go into national lockdown, the numbers of hours work increased by about 10%. We also have coming about through the economic crisis and people working home, we have a digitization, right? A sort of massive increase in digitization of work. And digitization of work might actually make it harder to disconnect.
The study, produced by WHO and the International Labour Organization, focused on 15 countries in 2 regions. Data showed that most of the victims were men and were middle-aged or older. People living in Southeast Asia and the Western Pacific region, including China, Japan and Australia, were the most affected. WHO recommended the need for capping work hours to increase worker productivity and protect workers' health.
A driverless car in Arizona got a little confused before speeding away from a roadside assistance team. The culprit, orange cones blocking the street. The passenger recorded the incident from inside the minivan. Waymo says the car requested help from a remote fleet response specialist. Unfortunately, the employee provided incorrect guidance and a roadside assistance team had to be called. Once they arrived, the taxi sped away. Eventually, the car surrendered to a human driver who was able to complete the trip. And in other news, a company in Wales has developed a new way to help the environment. It's recycling PPE waste, like masks, into new products and reducing pollution. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
Millions of single-use face masks, gowns, and curtains have helped the fight against the pandemic. But the items have also created thousands of tons of waste. One company in Wales says it has the solution: specialist machines that convert used PPE into reusable plastic.
We have a number of trusts now using our machines and specifically to take out the plastics and also the face masks, which has become a huge problem in the current pandemic.
Face masks go inside the machine for about an hour. What comes out is a 40-pound block of plastic. They're already being reused to make things like toolboxes and new school chairs. It's estimated that over the past 12 months, almost 20 billion disposable masks have been used in the UK alone. But that's still a tiny portion of the 240 million tons of waste the country produces each year. Demand for PPE remains steady, and being able to recycle pandemic waste could provide a long-term solution. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
The small island of Prochita in the Bay of Naples has been nominated the Capital of Italian Culture 2022. Residents there are hoping the title will help revive the local economy. NTD's Andrew Thomas tells us more.
The small island of Prochita has just been announced as Italy's capital of culture for 2022. Despite being featured in well-known films like Il Postino and The Talented Mr. Ripley, locals say tourists often overlook Prochita in favor of its larger sister islands, Capri and Ischia. But now, the inhabitants are delighted their island's profile is being raised. The hope is they'll soon be able to welcome visitors from around the globe as the pandemic fades. Long-term resident Gemma Ventrice is overjoyed at Prochita's new status.
This is a great satisfaction for us, having this small island and being world famous. It's too wonderful. It was an immense joy when they gave us the news, for me and for all of us, for all residents of Prochita.
In the sleepy port of Coricella, fisherman Francesco Trapani puts the emphasis on employment and restaurants.
We hope it will get better, that the people of Prochita will do great things, all of us. There will be more employment, restaurants will be busy, everything will be better because the island has to raise its head.
Prochita Mayor Raimondo Ambrosino says the island has a lot to offer. The main events planned for 2022 will center on art, music, literature, food, and architecture.
Prochita is a coming together of all Mediterranean cultures, one which came to the island thanks to shipping, because in the history of Prochita, the sea has always been the connecting element, the one which allowed us to be in contact with many countries in the Mediterranean and worldwide.
According to Mayor Ambrosino, there are 40 positive cases on the island at the moment, but he hopes the island will be free of the virus shortly. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
That's the news for today, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Stuart Leith.